West Legal Ed Center and Celeste Attorneys Ed Center would like to welcome you to today's program, The ABCs of the Remote Law Practice, a practical guide for lawyers and small firms. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to Jacob Stein for further introductions and to start the program. Jacob?
Thank you, Michael. Welcome, everyone, to this presentation on remote law practices. I'm Jacob Stein. I'm the managing partner of Aliantlaw. We are a global law firm. And this is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because we've been exploring running our law firm in the United States on the remote basis. And this is something we've been looking at for years. And we have transitioned to being a remote-based law firm. And in the process of going into that transition, making that transition, I spend countless hours talking to, all the existing remote law firms out there, the bigger ones. I'll share with you who they are and how they operate, speaking to literally hundreds of lawyers about that model and perfecting that model. So I'm going to make a quick introduction of that structure and then hand it off to my much more qualified co-speakers. And I'll just kind of briefly introduce first who the speakers will be, and then talk a little bit about the law firm structures in general. So first we'll have Diane Camacho. Diane has spent more than 30 years as a legal manager in law firms of various sizes. She started her consulting practice in 2013, and she consults small firms around the country on a variety of management and operational issues, including starting up law firms and remote law firms. She speaks frequently in the legal community on operations, IOLTA accounts, software, starting new firms. She teaches law office management at San Francisco State University. And I've heard Diane speak a number of times. She's a wonderful speaker. And then after Diane, we'll have Larry Cohn. Larry is the president of Cohn Communications. His firm specializes in assisting lawyers in acquiring new clients, kind of focus on business development and perfecting the sales process. And I think Larry's been also doing this for over 30 years and has worked with probably well over 1,000 lawyers, from the biggest rainmakers at the AmLaw 100 firms to solo practitioners. And Larry's also the developer of a fairly unique web app called bizdevcoach.com. That uses a combination of tutorials and technology to help lawyers plan and implement business development strategies and kind of help them be accountable. And he's an author of a couple of books. One is called Selling in Your Comfort Zone, and the other Selling with Honor. And is just a very, very well accomplished, very well known consultant and speaker. I've heard Larry speak as well, and he is just a wonderful presenter. And then following Larry will be Michael Bono. Michael is an attorney with our law firm with Aliant. Michael has practiced law for over 30 years, including serving as both in-house and outside general counsel for various technology startups. He's very sort of tech savvy. And for our law firm, sort of on a global basis, Michael has been leading the AI charge. So he has spent a lot of time experimenting with and assessing AI tools for lawyers. And his presentation is wonderful. I've also heard him present this before, and it's a very, very interesting, very specific presentation. So if you think about, how we got here, right? So going back to 17th, 18th centuries, right? Lawyers practice as solos. There was no such thing as a law firm. You just had a lawyer who was a sort of a tradesman almost, right? Who practiced law. And then with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, mostly starting in the UK, right? You would see lawyers forming small cooperative, kind of like the original barrister offices in the UK. And they were like maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 lawyers. And it's only in the early 1900s that the cravat system was developed in the United States, where you would have these, large firms with partners overseeing, a lot of associates in this sort of a pyramid structure for a law firm that we all grew up with. But what we started seeing I would say, in the mid 1980s is this evolution of the Cravath system in movement towards the remote, or what used to be called virtual law firms. So let's get the terminology straight. People use several terms for these types of firms. You can call them remote law firms, right, which signifies that lawyers are working remotely. And this can be a solo lawyer, right, with their own practice remotely, or it can be a law firm where lawyers are not in a central office, but they are in their own offices, wherever they happen to be. Often these firms nowadays are called decentralized law firms to sort of stress the fact that there's no central office. And then they used to be called more often in the past virtual law firms, but I think that's a bad terminology because there's nothing virtual about that a firm like that. It's a real firm, but lawyers are just not in a centralized office. But this movement towards the remote practice was started by a law firm called Fisher Broyles in the mid 1980s. Fisher Broyles, over 30-some years, grew to about 300 lawyers. Although more recently, half of their lawyers left to form a new firm. But starting even before COVID, a number of competitor firms have sprung up. The bigger ones being RemoteLaw and Potomac Law Group and Taylor English. So all of these firms operate on a remote model, and all of them are sort of in the business of the firm servicing their lawyers, right? So these firms and the lawyers that work at these firms have a split of billings, right? So the billings that come in, let's say if it's a RemoteLaw, and I'm using approximate numbers, something like 75% is going to go to the lawyer who originated the work and did the billings, and 25% is going to go to the law firm that to cover various direct costs and overhead like billings, collections, paralegals, marketing, bookkeeping, software subscriptions, and things of that nature. And these firms nowadays are, from a few dozen lawyers to a couple of hundred lawyers, and all the lawyers work from their own offices and not from a central office. And so similarly, our law firm, Aliant, has decided to adopt that model. And I'll just share our experience because I think I can be a little more specific about it with our own firm, just to show you guys how it works. So we have two different models. One model is for lawyers who are leaving, partners who are leaving big law firms, and instead of starting their own practice, they want to come into a firm like ours where they can practice really independently, right? They are really running, in a practical sense, their own practice. They can have their own office anywhere, in an office building, or practice from a home office, doesn't matter to us. And our firm provides all these various services to these lawyers in exchange for 20% of collections, right? So they get paralegal support, they get various software like practice management software, document management software, things that Diane will talk about later. They get bookkeeping and billings support, and various other things that you'd expect a firm to provide to you, CLE training and what have you, networking, marketing, and so forth. And then we have another model that targets solo practitioners, and this is what we call a membership model. So this is really modeled after the Costco business model, where the firm has much more significant buying power than an individual lawyer, and we have significant economies of scale when it comes to insurance, to software subscriptions, bookkeeping, even paralegal services. And we directly pass through these cost savings to all of our lawyers, and in exchange, they pay us a fairly nominal membership fee to be a part of the firm. And then, of course, if you're a part of the firm as opposed to being a solo lawyer, there are all sorts of other benefits built in, right? Access to networking, so you get other lawyers making referrals to you. You get origination credits if you refer work to other lawyers. You have support from other professionals, right, from other experts. You can go after much larger clients because you have the credibility of a much bigger brand. So as far as I'm concerned, kind of these remote practice models offer lawyers the best of both worlds, right? What's the best about being a solo lawyer? Meaning you have the independence of your practice. You get to pick what kind of clients you represent. You get to pick how much you charge them, how much you work, where you work from, right? So all of these wonderful benefits of being independent, and we're combining this with the benefits of being a big firm, like brand credibility, buying power, networking, business development, things of that nature. So I'm trying to merge those two together. So I strongly believe that this new model, the remote law model, especially for small to middle market practices, it's a beautiful new development. I think we're going to see a continued push in this direction. And certainly COVID made this much more appealing, right? It just became quite okay to be remote, to be virtual. There's no stigma attached to it anymore. A lot of people work nowadays like that. A lot of our clients work that way, right? So there's nothing wrong with lawyers doing it. And now we have the technology, and all of our speakers will talk about it, that enables us to be super productive working remotely, to connect us to clients, to connect us to other colleagues. So we can now run our practices much more cheaply than we used to be able to, and increase our profitability, reduce our stress. And I think it's just an incredible business model.